Welcome once again. Let's get into it. Try opening a pair of scissors right now. If you're left-handed, they don't quite work. The blades cross the wrong way. You can't see your own cutting line. It's a small daily failure, built into a world made for someone else's hands. But the real answer to why this happens is far stranger, because left-handedness should have disappeared a long time ago. Here's the strange part. About 10% of humans are left-handed. That number has barely moved in thousands of years. Not 5%, not 15, 10, consistently. Across cultures, across centuries, across a species that punishes left-handers constantly. Think about that punishment for a second. For most of history, left-handed children were forced to switch. Scissors, desks, tools, even the word sinister comes from the Latin word for left. Left-handers were seen as unlucky, unnatural, sometimes evil. Every advantage in this world was built for the right hand. So why didn't evolution just erase it? If being left-handed made you slower, weaker, or less likely to survive, natural selection should have wiped it out generations ago. A trait that costly, that disadvantaged, should trend toward zero. Instead, it holds steady at roughly 1 in 10 humans, generation after generation. That stability is the real mystery, not why left-handers exist, why they never stopped existing. The first clue comes from your genes. Researcher Chris McManus, who has spent decades studying handedness at University College London, found that no single gene decides which hand you favor. It's not one switch. It's a combination of many genes interacting with chance, even before birth. Identical twins who share the exact same DNA are sometimes born with opposite dominant hands. Something is happening in the womb that genetics alone can't fully explain. That randomness might actually be the point. Here's where it gets interesting. Some scientists think left-handedness survives not despite being rare, but because it's rare. Imagine a fight, not a boxing match with rules and referees. A real fight, the kind your ancestors actually faced, over territory, over food, over survival. Most people you'd face would be right-handed because most people always have been. Your brain, if you're right-handed, has spent a lifetime reading right-handed movement. The angle of a punch, the direction of a swing. It's all familiar. Now imagine your opponent is left-handed. Suddenly, everything mirrors. The angle is wrong. The timing feels off by a fraction of a second. And in a fight, a fraction of a second is everything. Researchers Faurie and Michel Raymond studied this exact idea, comparing violence rates across traditional societies. They found that in cultures with higher rates of interpersonal violence, left-handedness was more common. Not slightly more common, meaningfully more common. In one of the most violent societies they studied, left-handers made up over a quarter of the population. That's the fighting hypothesis. Being rare gives you an edge. The rarer left-handedness is, the bigger the surprise advantage becomes. But if too many people become left-handed, the surprise disappears because now everyone's used to fighting lefties too. This creates a balance, a tug-of-war between advantage and familiarity. Mathematician Daniel Abrams actually built a formula to test this. He modeled sports data, comparing one-on-one combat sports like boxing and fencing to team sports like basketball. His prediction was that in sports where individual reaction time matters most, left-handers should be overrepresented, and in team sports where cooperation matters more than surprise, they shouldn't be. His model matched the data closely. Left-handed athletes are dramatically overrepresented in fencing and boxing, far less so in basketball or volleyball. 10% isn't a random leftover number. It's closer to an equilibrium point, a frequency where the advantage of surprise and the disadvantage of unfamiliarity balance out almost perfectly. But this isn't only about violence. Some researchers point to the brain itself. Left-handed people often show more even distribution of language and spatial processing across both hemispheres instead of everything clustering on one side. That doesn't make anyone smarter, but it might make certain kinds of creative or lateral thinking slightly easier to access, which could explain why left-handers show up so often in music, art, and architecture, professions that reward seeing a problem from an unexpected angle. So maybe left-handedness never needed defending. Maybe it was never a flaw waiting to be corrected. Maybe it was a form of cognitive diversity that human groups quietly needed, a small percentage of people whose brains were wired just differently enough to notice what everyone else missed. In a fight, that difference was a weapon. In a society, it might have been an idea. Every left-handed person alive today is carrying something ancient, not a defect that slipped through evolution's filter, a trait that evolution deliberately kept in the mix at just the right frequency for just long enough, generation after generation. Which means the next time you watch someone struggle with a pair of right-handed scissors, you're not watching a mistake nature forgot to fix. You're watching one of evolution's oldest, quietest strategies still playing out in real time.